Imagine you work for the most powerful photography company in the world. You're 24 years old, just out of college, and you've just built something that will change everything. Not in 10 years, not in 20. Everything. You walk into a room full of executives. You show them the future, and they tell you,
"That's cute. Don't tell anyone about it."
This is the story of Steve Sasson, the man who invented the digital camera in 1975, and the company that buried it, to protect a business that no longer exists. To understand how Kodak destroyed itself, you first need to understand how powerful it was.
Fun's more fun with a camera wherever you are, you know. Take your camera along and save it in pictures.
Why not get an extra roll of Kodak film tomorrow?
At its peak, Eastman Kodak controlled 90% of film sales and 85% of camera sales in the United States. Think about that. 9 out of every 10 rolls of film sold in America, Kodaks. The company was founded in 1888 by George Eastman, who had one mission: make photography accessible to everyone. Before Eastman, cameras were massive, expensive machines used only by professionals. Eastman changed that. His slogan was simple: "You press the button, we do the rest." And for nearly a century, that was enough. By the 1970s, Kodak employed over 60,000 people. Their headquarters in Rochester, New York, was essentially a city within a city. They had their own fire department, their own power plant, their own research labs. One of those labs was about to change the world. In June 1973, a 23-year-old electrical engineer named Steve Sasson walked through Kodak's doors for his first day of work. Kodak didn't usually hire electrical engineers. They hired chemical engineers, mechanical engineers, people who understood film. Sasson was different, and that difference would matter. His manager gave him what seemed like a simple task: figure out what this new technology called a charge-coupled device, a CCD chip, could actually do. Sasson spent months experimenting, and then something clicked. He realized this chip could capture light, and if it could capture light, it could capture images. Without film. He started building. He used a Super 8 camera lens from Kodak's own parts bin. He connected it to a CCD chip. He rigged it to a digital cassette recorder to store the images. The result was a device roughly the size of a toaster. It weighed 8 pounds. It ran on 16 AA batteries. And in December 1975, Steve Sasson pointed it at a lab technician named Joy and took the world's first digital photograph. It took 50 milliseconds to capture the image. It took 23 seconds to save it to the tape. The resolution was 0.01 megapixels. It was crude. It was clunky. It was revolutionary. In 1976, Sasson was ready to present his invention to Kodak's executives. Picture the scene. A young engineer walks in carrying what looks like a modified toaster with wires hanging out. He takes photos of everyone in the room before saying a word. Then he pulls out the cassette tape, plugs it into a playback unit, and a black and white image appears on a television screen. The room goes silent. Then the questions start. Not, how does this work? Not, what could this become? Why would anyone want to look at their pictures on a television set? Here's how Sasson described their reaction years later.
They were convinced that no one would ever want to look at their pictures on a television set. Print had been with us for over 100 years. No one was complaining about prints.
And then came the words that sealed Kodak's fate. Management's official response, and this is a real quote, was,
"That's cute. Don't tell anyone about it."
The invention was patented in 1978 and then quietly shelved. Sasson was reportedly told not to discuss it publicly. The project was classified internally. Kodak had just invented the future. and locked it in a drawer. Here's where the story gets almost unbelievable. In 1979, just 4 years after Sassoon's invention, Kodak commissioned an internal study. The question, what would happen to the photography industry if digital technology kept advancing? The report's conclusion was precise and devastating. It predicted that digital photography would replace film by the year 2010. Let that sink in. In 1979, Kodak's own researchers told leadership exactly what was coming. They had a 30-year warning, and they did almost nothing with it. Why? Because film was still making them extraordinary amounts of money. Every roll of film sold was nearly pure profit. The margins on digital were a fraction of that. Kodak's executives understood the threat intellectually, but they couldn't bring themselves to act on it. This is what business strategists now call the innovator's dilemma, when a company is so successful at what it does that it can't afford, psychologically or financially, to disrupt itself. Kodak didn't lack information. They lacked courage. While Kodak hesitated, the world moved on. In 1984, the Los Angeles Olympics happened. Kodak, the most powerful photography brand on Earth, declined to sponsor the event. Fujifilm, a Japanese competitor, seized the opportunity. In front of a global audience of billions, Fujifilm was everywhere. Their brand recognition in America exploded. By the late 1990s, Fuji had gone from 10% of the US film market to nearly 17%, eating then directly the digital camera's dominance. Sony, Canon, Nikon. They launched consumer digital cameras in the 1990s using technology that, in many cases, traced back to patents that Kodak held. Kodak did eventually enter the digital camera market in 1995, 20 years after Sassoon's invention. For a brief moment, it worked. By 2001, Kodak was the #1 selling digital camera brand in America. But the margins were catastrophic. Digital cameras didn't need film, and film was where Kodak made its money. Every digital camera sold, even their own, was a nail in the coffin. Then came smartphones. In 2007, Steve Jobs unveiled the iPhone. Photography would never be the same. Film was already dying. Now cameras themselves were disappearing into pockets. Kodak's stock, which had peaked at $94 in 1997, had fallen to under $1 by 2011. On January 19, 2012, Eastman Kodak filed for bankruptcy. The same year, Steve Sassoon received the British Royal Photographic Society's Progress Medal for inventing the digital camera. Kodak's story isn't just about a company that failed to adapt to technology. It's about something more human than that. They knew. They had the invention in 1975. They had the warning report in 1979. They had 30 years to act. But knowing something is coming and choosing to act on it are two completely different things, especially when acting means destroying the very thing that made you successful. Steve Sassoon retired from Kodak in 2009, 3 years before the bankruptcy. He said this:
I was sad about it. I saw it coming, and Kodak had a resistant attitude towards it. I retired because I thought they would probably go away. I didn't want them to, but it was just looking that way.
The man who built the future, watching the company he gave his career to choose its past instead. Today, Kodak still exists, selling industrial printing solutions, a shadow of its former self, and the original prototype survives as a museum artifact, a toaster-sized device made of Super 8 parts and a cassette tape. The world's first digital camera, built by a 24-year-old engineer who was told, "Don't talk about it. The secret." That destroyed a company. If you made it to the end, thank you. Subscribe for what comes next. There are many more stories like this one.